Hello, MotoAmerica fans. It's time for another episode of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you may even learn something from this unlikely pair and their special guest. The mic is yours, Paul and Sean.
Hello, MotoAmerica fans, and welcome to another edition of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. This is a non-video edition, obviously, which is probably best for me. But I do like doing the video ones when we're at the track, no doubt about it. But for sure, these video ones are a little easier on the eyes, especially when I'm involved. So, anyway, so I'm joined, of course, as always, by our communications director, Paul Carruthers. Hello, Paul.
That's pretty good. I went from manager to director. I hope I get a raise.
I'm moving you up. Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, man. Can you make me senior vice president of marketing or of communications? Would that work?
Yeah, and I'm glad you picked up on that because I absolutely did that on purpose because it's about damn time you're the director.
Well, this is our 242nd podcast. I just looked it up.
Wow.
Kind of crazy. We've done them basically every week. We've missed a couple of weeks. I think we've missed one. I think we've only missed a total of 2 or maybe 3.
Yeah, there haven't been many. Yeah, and there's always been something a little weird that caused it. I mean, we actually missed one recently when we were at Laguna, but you know, that was a weird day that Thursday. We usually try to do them on Thursday in video form, but you know, when we got there, as a lot of fans know, we had some issues with our website, and we were kind of trying to figure that out, and it affected our ability to put stories up on the website, including previews and all kinds of stuff. So we were scrambling a little bit to get that, and the podcast had to take a back seat. But you know, we're back, and you know, we've had 1 or 2 since then. So, and then our next one will be video because we'll be at Brainerd International Raceway up in the land of 10,000 lakes in Minnesota. And it's so weird about that area, Paul. I know you probably noticed the same thing, but when we go to look for accommodations up there, if you actually look at it on a map, it's kind of weird how like that track is right in the middle of a bunch of the lakes that are in Minnesota. There's like a ton of them right around there.
Yeah, I think there's 1,000 right there, and then the other 9,000 are somewhere else. But yeah, it's kind of an odd place. It's a little, I guess it's it's funny when you're from California, you don't have these like so much little like lake towns, you know, like Elkhart Lake is one, and obviously Brainerd, where, you know, people vacation and they go there and stay on the lake. It seems so foreign to me being, you know, in Southern California, because that's not something we do. I guess we just go to the ocean. But yeah. I've been going there since, I guess I would have gone there in 86 or something. Right. Back when it was the big track, and then there was World Superbike. And then, you know, obviously we didn't go there for a long time. And then we started going again. And it uses some of the old track, obviously, but there's also some new stuff. So it's a bit different, but the town is still the same. It hasn't really changed much in all those years. And it's just, it's kind of cool. It's a different little place. Like I said, it's a little resort town. And I guess it's a big honeymoon place, or it used to be. I don't know if it still is, but it was like, you know, if you live in Minneapolis and you get married, maybe Brainerd's a place that you end up honeymooning with. So that's why I think, Sean, you're a little bit more romantic when we're in Brainerd, maybe.
I'm always more romantic. And I was about to say, for you, since you're recently engaged, you know, you're going to have to pick out the place you're going to get married up there, you know. So.
I don't think I'm going to be honeymooning in Brainerd, but we'll see.
All right, well, let's get started with this week's guest. And it's a rider that it's kind of hard to believe we have never had him on here. And it's long overdue to have him because it's Cory West. And it's incredible when you look back at Cory's career. He's been around for a long time, and it belies his look because he doesn't look like an aged veteran of racing. Still got a big smile on his face all the time, and always a good guy to talk to in the paddock. But I mean, he got his start in road racing probably long before 2001, but as far as a professional racer in 2001, and he was 2004 AMA Superbike Rookie of the Year. And then he had a long career. He's one of the riders we can count in our current paddock who and we'll check this with Cory, but I'm sure this is right. He is a former factory superbike rider. He raced for EBR, and I'm sure he was a factory rider for that group. And, he raced in MotoAmerica. Well, it was AMA Pro Racing or AMA Racing before that, but he also did some racing overseas and in China. And, we'll talk to him about some of that. Kind of started out in two strokes, which is near and dear to Paul's and my heart for sure. And this year, he's currently ranked 9th in Mission King of the Baggers. He rides a Team Saddlemen Harley-Davidson Road Glide. And he actually also races in Mission Super Hooligan National Championship. One of the riders who actually climbed aboard a Harley-Davidson Pan America this year. And he's doing even better in that class. He's actually 4th ranked in that championship. He's had 5 top 5s out of the 6 races so far, a couple podiums. He was 2nd at Ridge. He was 3rd and 4th at Laguna. And they've only got one more round in that series, that championship, which will be at COTA. So it's kind of a rare treat for those guys to be able to race down there. So, obviously a little bit better results in Hooligan, but certainly one of the king of the baggers riders as well aboard a Harley. And we're going to definitely talk to him about both those. In King of the Baggers, they've got 3 more rounds, including this next round next weekend at Brainerd. So Cory will be on track with his Team Saddlemen group, which includes Jake Lewis and also Cory's wife, Patricia Fernandez West. And they have quite a story to tell. We did a little piece on them recently, which was around the theme of For the Love of the Sport. So, and it's truly that way with those guys, with those 2 riders, Patricia and Cory. But anyway, long introduction, but Cory, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm doing well. Thanks for not doing the video. I got a face for radio.
Oh, I'm worse. Yeah, I don't think, no, you got a nice smile, Cory.
I got a quick story to start this with, because I think like everybody else, Patricia's very popular in the paddock, obviously, because she looks pretty darn good, like she looks a lot better than Cory. And it's funny, I forget what race, they're both always smiling, right? I mean, I've never seen anybody as happy as those 2.
Yes.
At some point we should maybe sit down with both of them and find out how to get that happy and pass it on. Maybe we can make some money out of it, Sean. But yeah. I was walking past Patricia. I think it was like on hot pit. She was in leathers going one direction and I was just dressed regular going the other way. And I said, man, you're always smiling. And she said, if you look this good, you'd be happy too. And I was like, well, that pretty much summarizes it. But at that point, I also thought, well, that's something Cory couldn't be able to answer to that because he definitely doesn't look as good as her. But that's my happy Fernandez story of the day. But Cory, you've been when Sean started mentioning, like 2004, that seems like a zillion years to me. Has that gone quickly for you, or does it also seem like a long, long time ago?
I mean, it goes by fast, but then you look back on it and you're like, man, that was a long time ago. So, I mean, when you look back at it in like race seasons, it seems like those seasons, they go by so fast, but then you look back at like the years and it's like, holy cow, that was over 20 years ago almost. So since I started anyway. So yeah, I'm old guy now. Crazy.
I really don't think of you that way, though.
Yeah, that's what I am. I was sitting there just in stunned silence because I'm like, he's not that old. But how old are you?
I will be 39 next month.
Oh, he's a baby.
Yeah, but still 39. Yeah. That's kind of surprised. That shocks me. But then when you think back to when you started, Cory, and it's funny. I think for Paul and me, because we're a few years beyond you, but when you think of, riders from Arkansas, I mean, you certainly come up, but the one that we think of for Paul and I, of course, because of certain reasons, is John Kosinski. And, John's a little bit older than you, but, John made a lot of waves in 2-stroke racing, and that's kind of how you started. So I want to go way back there for a minute. And was John any kind of an influence on you racing 2-strokes? Do you know him? Is there any connection at all?
No. So my dad back in the day, when he was doing some flat track stuff, he says he remembers seeing John and his dad come to some of the flat track races, and he was just a kid, you know. And honestly, I've never met John Kaczynski, but obviously he was the first big name from Arkansas that went on to the world stage. But yeah, for me, I mean, like, I turned 16 and my dad, you know, we went the route of getting my professional road race card. And then, you know, the only real entry level class would have been 250 Grand Prix on two strokes, or then maybe like Pro Thunder back in the day, the V-twin class. So I dabbled in both those classes a little bit in my first couple years, and then moved on to the inline four cylinders.
You know, it's funny, way back, that was my favorite class. It's probably still is, if you think about, I mean, certainly Superbike, but man, that 250 GP class, everybody that was involved in that, and you think about Roland Sands and Chris Sorensen, or even before that, I mean, you know, Thomas Stevens was involved in it. But, you know, it's funny, Cory, I always think that it always feels like such, I guess I can't think of another word other than to say an esoteric group of riders. I mean, the riders were a little different. You know, the tuners were always very involved in making sure the atmosphere was just the way they needed to be for jetting and stuff. And they always had their dials out and they were doing stuff. And obviously when they would fire them up, you know, they didn't have electric starters or kick starters. You guys had to bump start them. And then that smell that wafted through the air was just the most amazing thing. And, you know, purely, you know, closest to what GP bikes were back then. And I mean, I still have a fond place in my heart for those. And I know Paul does too. You know, I still have a TZR 250, a 92 model. And I love that bike so much. And you probably, do you still harbor a little bit of sentimentality towards two strokes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, honestly, I feel like two strokes wouldn't hurt nowadays. I mean,
right.
These kids come up now, right? You know, they come up riding Ninja 400s and stuff like that. And to put a Ninja 400 and a TZ 250 next to each other, I mean, you're looking at a spork and a razor knife. So I mean, we just learned on different motorcycles, and, you know, it makes you a good rider when you're you know, riding such a sharp edge motorcycle. But you know, not to take anything away from the kids on the 400s, they're definitely riding the crap out of those things too. But yeah, the old two strokes, man, they're rad. I miss them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I haven't really thought about that. You know, a lot of people these days talk about, you know, whether riders in our series or in any series should start off on like a more proper, sort of related to a GP chassis, like a Moto 3 or something. And maybe that's kind of the deal with 250 GP back then. Like you said, I mean, it kind of did train you they were production road racers, but they were not like converted street bikes, which is what obviously junior cup bikes are. So, you know, maybe that's kind of the secret a little bit, that you guys started out on those bikes, and obviously we know what Rich Oliver did with his career, and, you know, gave two strokes a big name for history is in production racing in the US. But maybe there's something to be said there, Cory, that, you know, that maybe was what now would have been, people would think of as Moto 2 or Moto 3 for kind of training to get on actual proper race bikes. Do you think there's a connection there?
For sure. I mean, they taught me a lot. I mean, I crashed that 250 quite a few times, and I think I only low-sided it once. So high-siding was a thing, and those bikes were unforgiving. So you either learn fast or you quit, basically.
Well, yeah. And I mean, talking about learning fast, not too long after that, you were Superbike Rookie of the Year. You had a pretty big transition. There was only a couple of years later that you had that whole situation. So tell us about your first foray into Superbike.
So I'm going to back up just a little bit. So 2001, 2002 were my first years on 250s. I made it about halfway through 2002, and the two strokes were just eating our lunch. You know, between my dad and I, it was really tough to have enough parts to keep the bike maintained, and we were blowing them up a lot. It was really hard. So we went the route of, we took a step sideways. We went to Formula USA. At that time, they had a series that was dirt track and road race. And so I kind of came up from a flat track background. So we kind of went that way. I rode a 600 and a 450 when they first came out. I chased that championship for that year. And then 2003, Kenny Roberts helped me get a ride over in Spain. And I raced in the Spanish Championship in 03 on a 600 Honda. It was actually Xavi Fores' teammate back then, which is kind of crazy. But when I came home from Spain, the only viable option was to build a 1000 and go into Superbike because they had the healthiest purse. Chevy Trucks was sponsoring the series back then. And, you know, if you could finish in the top 20, you were going to make a couple grand. And so that's what my dad and I did. We found this old Suzuki, I think it was the 03 GSX-R 1000 that was actually like a insurance repo. It was like total or something, but it had a big old scratch in the frame. Everything else was all right. So we just threw some race body work on it, put a tuner on it. And I mean, this is before quick shifters and all that jazz. So we basically didn't even have any spare wheels. I think we had maybe one spare rear or something. So we just threw the bike in the van and just started chasing the championship. And the very first race was Daytona in 2004. And that was the last year the Superbikes ran the 200. And, you know, my dad had done the 200 a few times in the 80s and had a lot of good advice. And we had a few friends help us. And I ended up finishing 13th first time in the 200. And that just kind of kept going throughout the year. I mean, I went to some tracks where there was a lot of locals and it was hard to break the top 20. And then later on in the year, we went to Brainerd, the old layout, and I finished 13th there again. So those are my best finishes, were 13th that season, which was pretty decent if you look at the entry list back then. But I think I only crashed out of maybe one race at Laguna that year. And so I did pretty darn good in the points for a privateer and ended up coming home with the Rookie of the Year award, which was, you know, cherry on top.
That's pretty awesome. Now we have to backtrack just for a second, Cory. You got to tell us a little bit about this thing. You mentioned Kenny Roberts. So, you know, Paul's dad tuned for Kenny. How did you get connected with Kenny? Was it your dad? I mean, how did that connection go from, well, Arkansas out to Modesto or where he ever, you know, the ranch, and then the whole thing with Spain? I mean, that's pretty good that you got hooked up with him.
Yeah, it was through a mutual friend of the family, Ronnie Jones, big dirt track guy, national number 16 forever. Him and my dad were pretty good buds, and Ronnie and Kenny are good buddies because Ronnie beat Kenny at the Astrodome way back when. And so the story I was told was Kenny asked Ronnie if he knew any young up-and-coming dirt trackers that road race, and Ronnie mentioned my name. And so I got to go out to Kenny's ranch. Oh, I want to say it was like the winter of 01 going into 02. And I believe Kenny Jr. was the world champ then. Yeah. And so I got to go out there and I spent just a weekend, like 3 days. Ronnie was there. Kenny Sr. was there. Curtis was there. And so I rode with those guys on XR100s for a couple days and basically got the invite to come back over the winter and train with everybody. And so I went back that winter and I spent like 4 weeks, I think. It was really cool. And so just rode XR100s, went to the gym, did some dirt bike riding with those guys at the ranch. And then Kenny kind of threw it out like, hey, I'm owed a favor over in Spain because he was still running his Grand Prix team. And just threw it out there like, would you be interested in going over and racing in Spain for next year? And I was, fresh out of high school. And that was kind of the dream. Like, yeah, of course, that would be amazing. Like, I knew nothing about racing in Spain. And so he kind of put the deal together, and before you know it, I was over there testing, and I spent 3 months the first trip over, and then they don't do anything in August, and then I went back for another 3 months and finished the season out. It was tough. It was the year that the 600RR Honda came out, and I was on the last year's model, the F4i. So I kind of got my butt kicked, but had a couple points scoring finishes, got to ride a bunch of really cool tracks, and learned a ton. And when I came back from Spain, I felt like I had sharpened my knife pretty well.
Okay, so you mentioned Xavi being your teammate. When you saw him this year, was it like you go talk to him, you remember him, he remembers you, and you're like, holy crap, you're in America?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we kind of looked at each other like, yeah, we're both old now, but welcome to the States. I mean, of course, when I was over there, I didn't really speak any Spanish, and he didn't speak a lot of English. So we would, gesture towards each other occasionally. And I mean, for the most part, Xavi, kicked my butt, but there was a couple of rounds where it rained, and I was right up there with everybody and kind of got their attention when it was wet out.
Being Spanish, he probably had the RR.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, there you go. That's your excuse.
There was some politics going on. I mean, none of the Spanish guys wanted to see the Americans beat all their people, and I don't think I was at that level. But at the same time, I was kind of handicapped from the get go. But I'm grateful for the experience. It was super rad, and like I also got to go to all the Grand Prix that year in Spain and hang out with Kenny's team, and Chuck Axland was running the team back then, so that's when I first met Chuck and all that jazz. So yeah, super cool. I mean, it was great to get to see like the behind the scenes of how Grand Prix teams work, and the level that road racing is over there in Europe. It was an eye opener for sure.
Well, I'm going to fast forward a bit. Sean may want to take us back again, but for now, I'm going to jump forward to now. And do you see this like King of the Baggers, Hooligans? I mean, that's like a second career for you, right? I mean, it's like giving life back to, and I'm not going to say your career was dead by any means, but I mean, don't you think that gave it a big shot being involved in this King of the Baggers, especially with how it's kind of blown up?
Absolutely. I mean, factory teams, factory rides are so hard to come by here in the States. And, I kind of felt like I had gone down every avenue there was as far as road racing goes. And, we all know this is an expensive sport, and it got to where it was like, well, I can't really afford to keep doing this. And if I'm not really getting any offers, I'm just going to have to find something else to do. And then, that first year of the bagger thing, we did the exhibition race at Laguna, and I was fortunate enough to, have my name in a hat and got to ride. I got to ride one of those crazy things. I mean, they were real baggers back then, real street bikes. So,
right.
Just throw my leg over one of those and give her hell. And we ended up fifth, I think, at the first one. And then, that just kind of got my name in there with the American V-twin community. And then, man, it's just been amazing to see how quick it's all progressed. The baggers are crazy, and then the hooligans, that's kind of feels like more like a regular road race bike, even though they're naked and handlebars and whatever, but like they're lighter and feel more like a regular motorcycle. So my first go on one of those was like a Indian FTR 1200, and I rode it and was like, man, we should maybe do the Hooligan series, and it's just all progressed. I mean, it's been awesome, because a guy from Arkansas that's raced motorcycles since he was straight out of high school. I don't know a whole lot more than motorcycles, so it's awesome to still be in it. And this whole bagger thing has really given me that second opportunity.
Corey, I want to talk about Super Hooligan a little bit. And this is kind of interesting, at least for me. And I'm not, by telling this little story, I'm not saying I had anything to do with influencing it. But last year when Kyle was doing, I think it was for Revzilla. Yeah, it was Revzilla. And it was those guys were riding his bike, his Hooligan, or I'm sorry, his King of the Baggers bike. And they had a Pan America there. And Kyle was riding that bike, and Brian J or whoever was taking photos of it, and Kyle was going pretty fast around the track on that Pan America. And I remember talking to Zach, who is with Revzilla, about it, and he said, "Damn, Kyle's really fast on that bike." So I talked to Kyle and I said, I wonder if that Pan America would could be or made to fit in that class. And I ended up talking to Roland about it, and Roland said, it's a little bit higher horsepower, but I'm sure they could, do something with that. And I guess what they did is they changed the airbox on the top of it to be able to restrict it a little bit more. And I mean, it's weird. It's an ADV bike. I get the impression it's a pretty high bike. And now you're racing it. You, Patricia, are racing it, and you've actually done really well on that bike. I mean, you were second at Ridge. Like I said, you've had 5 top 5s so far. You were 3rd and 4th at Laguna, and you're right in the mix with those. I think that FTR 1200 is absolutely a weapon. So is Andy DeBrino's KTM. Those Hyper Motard Ducatis are pretty good. But then you've got this, American V twin ADV bike that you guys could have converted. It does okay in that class. Tell us about riding that bike in Super Hooligan.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super fun bike to ride. It is a little bit on the big side. I mean, the FTR 1200 was kind of a big bike, and then the Pan America is like a plus size version. Unfortunately, it does make more horsepower than the rules allow. And so they came up with a formula where we run the Harley-Davidson Sportster S model. It has the same engine, just a different airbox and velocity stacks. And so the rules were, we've got to run Sportster S velocity stacks and airbox lid.
Right.
And so that's what we've done. It's a competitive motorcycle right out of the get-go. Unfortunately, there's not really anybody that makes performance parts for them. And so we're just kind of learning as we go. It's been pretty tough, honestly. I mean, we had a great showing at Daytona. Unfortunately, the tune that we had to put in the bike, we had someone do the first tune for Daytona, and it caused one of our engines to melt down on the high banks. And so Harley was generous enough to give us a demo bike, a stocker, and okay, well, you guys can take the motor out of that thing. And so the boys at Salomon stayed up, well past when they want you to leave the garages at Daytona to put that motor in my bike. And so in the rush of getting it all buttoned up at 2 a.m, they accidentally grabbed the wrong airbox and put it in my race bike. I mean, they sent me pictures, and it's basically 2 motorcycles torn to pieces, and there was just parts everywhere between the stock bike and our bike. And late night confusion, they grabbed the wrong airbox. And then I went out and won race 2 at Daytona. The only time I've really gotten to scrap with those guys this year. And we won that one heads up. Well, then post-race tech, they tear into that airbox, and unfortunately we had the wrong velocity stacks in it. It was a simple mistake by our guys, but it was unfortunate because it was really cool to bring home a win the first weekend on a brand new motorcycle for Harley, for Salomon, for everybody. We were all really stoked, but we got DQ'd, and we just kind of had to let that one go. But now that we've thrown away all those other velocity stacks so we don't make that mistake again, we've been slowly making progress. I mean, we still don't even have a quick shifter on the bike, but it seems like Harley is starting to take some interest by just seeing how well I've been doing in the class. So hopefully we can, sharpen sharpen that Pan America a little bit and get a little closer to the front guys.
So it's one more round in that class. It's going to be at COTA, 2 more races. Do you wish the season was a little longer in Super Hooligan since you are developing that bike so much?
Yeah, honestly, it would be great to ride it at some different tracks. It seems like we take these naked bikes with no fairings to all these really fast racetracks. It's hard on the neck, let me tell you. That number plate doesn't offer a whole lot of wind protection. But yeah, I mean, they're fun bikes. I feel like people can kind of relate to them more because it's something that you would actually see maybe on the street more than just like a fully faired sport bike. But yeah, we'll see. It seems like Roland's getting a lot of entrants that are coming to play in the Hooligan class. So I don't know, maybe next year we'll see more.
Yeah, heck, I think they had a couple SV1000 Suzukis at Laguna. So yeah, the formula kind of fits for a lot of different manufacturers. Let's talk a little more about King of the Baggers. We did a tech piece with you, Cory, recently about the double. You've got a thumb brake with a separate caliper on the rear of your bike and a separate caliper for the front, basically a front hand brake, or I'm sorry, wait a minute. Thumb brake on the left, foot brake on the right, both going to the rear wheel, but 2 separate calipers, completely separate, independent lines. It was a little bit of an innovative difference on the thumb brake because usually they're kind of plumbed into the same thing, or you have one or the other or something like that. So, but I found out one of your guys was on my plane, and I think, is there an Eric on your team?
Yes.
Okay, Eric is the one I met. So we talked, and I remembered him from being in the background when you and I were talking, and he has told me that now all the bikes, like Jake's got the 2 calipers on the back. It's kind of proliferated throughout your team with the on the HD Road Glide in Mission King of the Baggers. Is that true that now you kind of started out with it, but now everybody's using it?
Yeah, I think when they first did it, they weren't sure if it was going to be good or not. And so they asked if I would be willing to try it before they, pony up the money and fit them to all the bikes under our tent. So I wrote it like that. And then, yeah, it works really good. I think they were kind of concerned about a few things, but we didn't have any glitches with it at MotoAmerica. And so, yeah, everyone, I don't think Patricia's running it yet. I don't think she's a big thumb brake user. So,
okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I know Jake, Frankie, and I are all running it right now.
Yeah, Frankie, yes. Forgot. God, how could I not mention Frankie? Yeah. So, okay, I want to ask you a little bit more about this because we didn't talk about this so much when we were doing the video because you were specifically talking about the mechanics of it. But now that you've ridden it a little bit and you are a flat tracker, I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume being a flat tracker, you use the rear brake, if not some, then quite a bit. So there are times, obviously, when you can't get your foot in the right position to use that rear brake, which is why the thumb brake is there. So double question on this, Cory. Do you use the thumb brake and the rear brake and the foot brake, the foot pedal interchangeably during a race? Do you use one or the other? And do you use it a fair amount, and what for in those races?
Mostly in the heavy braking zones is when I'll use the foot brake. I can use that foot brake basically dragging all the way to the apex, and then the thumb brake is more for when you're back on the throttle. It seems like I don't have a ton of feel with my foot, so it's harder to gauge how much pressure I'm giving the brake when I'm back on the gas. So therefore, it's much easier to use the thumb brake when I'm trying to blend the throttle and brake at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Sorry, Paul. I know you're going to go next. I just want to say, so I had talked to Matthew Skoltz about this a little bit. They've experimented with a thumb brake, but to the point of you and I talking about this, Cory, as you know, or probably would understand, it's one or the other. And exactly what you're saying, he didn't have the feel. he had too much feel in the thumb brake because he could modulate it a lot more than you can with your foot. So it wasn't really an apples to apples comparison between the two, although it was going to the rear brake. He just didn't like it because they could not figure out a good ratio to make it comparable to what he would do with his foot. So it's interesting that you use both during a race. So you can get that difference between the foot and the thumb. That's pretty good. Does that make sense to you that it was tough for Matthew to kind of deal with it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot going on. It might be honestly easier on a sport bike that has like the auto blipper for downshifts and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Be able to use the thumb brake. On these big Harleys, you know, you've got to clutch it, blip the throttle, do all this stuff to keep the thing happy under braking. And so having your left hand also on a thumb brake is kind of too much. You know, you have to use the clutch. I mean, maybe I'm one of the only ones that actually does use the clutch on the downshifts, but it just keeps the bike, you know, more under control, I feel like. And I don't have time to play with the thumb brake while I'm going into the corner, but that's what my foot's for. I can stomp on that thing because you kind of need to use both brakes to stop these big bikes. I mean, they're heavy. And if you just use front brake only, all that weight is just going to push you in there and you're going to have a whole lot of weight on the front. So, you know, I have no problem while I'm straight up and down using my foot. And then once I get, you know, some lean angle and I'm back on the gas, that's kind of when the thumb brake's nice, is when it's, you know, a little more delicate.
Okay, we've talked a little bit about the on-track stuff and how fortunate you feel to be part of a Harley-Davidson program, you know, factory racing, all that stuff in the baggers class. But when I look at what I think is really cool, what it kind of, I would think it would make everybody envious in the paddock that aren't a part of that, is to see, like, you guys just did this Harley-Davidson 120th birthday bash. All the Harley guys are there. The baggers guys are there. It looks like you're having a great time. There's concerts. I mean, in addition to the racing part, I just think it's a really good time to be part of the Harley-Davidson family. And they make you feel like that, right?
Absolutely. It's something that I haven't really experienced as far as, you know, road racing goes here in our country. You know, we don't have any manufacturers in the United States that are pumping out stuff that we race until now. And so, and especially with how big Harley-Davidson is worldwide, I mean, it's here in the States, it's something that people can relate to more than, you know, Kawasaki Ninjas or whatever. So, you know, Harley stepping up to help sponsor the Saddlemen team this year. You know, it just kind of took things to the next level for us. I mean, obviously our team stepped up even bigger and bought a semi truck and 4-rider team, and it's just been crazy. But Harley's been super generous and you know, incorporated us in a lot of things this year, which has been really nice. And the 120th anniversary up in Milwaukee, you know, they invited all the bagger racers up there, and it was super cool. I mean, it was like kind of like a little business vacation, but we got to hang out, all the racers and their girlfriends/wives. I mean, going to the concerts at night and doing some autograph signings and just seeing how many people are involved with Harley-Davidson or just love the brand. It's just incredible.
All right. What the other thing that caught my eye that you got the opportunity to do this year was the Northwest 200, you know, and your wife, Patricia, has been a part of that for a while. I'm not sure how many times she's actually been, but I know she's been before. I believe this was your first time. That's talk about a crazy event. I mean, I haven't been there since I was a kid when it was actually like the Ulster Grand Prix. But I mean, tell us a little bit about that experience. I mean, that's a real street riding racing track. It's you're with a bunch of guys that are, you know, very proficient in that sort of racing. Some of them aren't that proficient in other forms of racing, but for some reason, you know, there's those specialty guys that focus on that stuff, and they're pretty incredible when it comes to that. So tell us a little bit about your experience going there for the first time.
Yeah, the Northwest 200 was that was my first go at it. I've gone over to Ireland with Patricia a few times and watched her at the Ulster Grand Prix. I had never been to the Northwest 200, and she said that she told me that, like, if there was one that you're going to do, you should do the Northwest 200. Because every time I went over there, everyone's asking me, like, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? And I'm like, man, I don't really know if I care to do this stuff. This is crazy.
Right.
And so the Northwest 200, it's a 9-mile basically triangle that connects 3 towns together. Lap times are around 5 minutes long, average mile an hour around that place. I think I was somewhere in the 115 mile an hour or something like that. So it's really fast. A lot of long straights. And it's public roads, so you definitely gotta mind your manners out there. But the older I get, the more things that I would like to experience. In 2019, I'd always kind of had the Pikes Peak Hillclimb on my bucket list, and I got the opportunity to do that in 2019. And when Patricia, she rode for this JMCC roofing team last year at the Northwest 200, and I saw some of the pictures, and she said, man, this is a really good team. They have a bunch of good mechanics. They have good bikes. If you were wanting to do it, these guys would put you on a bike if it's something that you'd be interested in. And I said, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it on a super twin. Like, let's do it on the slowest bike possible. I don't want to step into the deep water yet. And they actually won the twins race last year. And so I knew that they had a good bike, and so they gave me the opportunity. And so I went over there with Patricia this year, and it was way different than the Pikes Peak Hillclimb, I'll tell you that. I mean, that's a time trial, and you only hit like 120 mile an hour one time. And then the Northwest 200 is just like, whew. I mean, I think I only got like maybe 6 or 7 laps before it was time to grid up and go for my first race. But I did qualify fast enough to be in the first wave of riders, which was all the fast guys. And but I was dead last in the first wave. So it kind of took the pressure off, like, okay, I'm going to go into this first turn. I'm not going to have a bunch of dudes trying to stuff me and make me feel uncomfortable. And then it's just up to me to tag along and then maybe pick some of these guys off. So I started 16th, and I ended up finishing 10th in the first race after a 10-second penalty. I blew one of the chicanes, and I didn't come to a complete stop. You're supposed to come to a stop, put your foot down, and then rejoin. And I was too enthralled in the battle that I was in that I kind of just rolled, turned my shoulder, and got right back in the gas. I didn't want to lose the group I was with. It was too fun. And then so 10th in the first race, and then I ended up 7th in the second race. So I actually did pretty good, passed a lot of people, and had a good time doing it.
That's really good.
Cory, tell me, I can't remember this, so forgive me if I'm incorrect about it, but didn't you race, or haven't you raced in the Macau GP?
I have not raced it, but I have attended it.
Okay.
I went over when the EBR, Eric Buell Racing, there was a team based out of England by the name of Split Lath Racing.
Yes.
And
yes.
so Mark Miller and Brandon Cretu were riding EBRs at Macau, and our season was over. This was in, they always do it in November. And so we basically just kind of, the team owner, I had done a couple of British Superstock rounds for that guy on the EBR. And so he was like, it'd be really cool if you could come over to Macau and see it and just kind of help the guys since you know the bike so well. And so I basically just kind of went over as a mechanics helper, and, you know, those guys could just kind of bounce questions off me. And, you know, John from Split Lap, he was trying to get me to do the roads as well. And so why don't you come over and see Macau? And, you know, if you want to do it, we could do it next year. And I went over and saw Macau, and I was like, man, I don't think I want to do any part of this. This is crazy. I mean, I rode the bus around with the boys, and it was a bit much. But that was my first time seeing any kind of like real road race. So, but honestly, I think I'm good on Macau. I don't think I really want to do Macau.
Well, that's why it's, I wanted to ask you, because when you talked about, doing some of these true road races, like the Northwest 200 or things like that. And I thought, well, yeah, Macau, gosh, it used to be, we'd see those photos, like you said, in November in Road Racing World or whatever. And you'd see those guys going around corners that they were literally scrubbing their shoulders against, concrete and everything. And I remember that split lath team, and certainly the EBR's, involvement in that race. And it kind of is a perfect segue, because I wanted to spend some time talking to you about the EBR, because we've had Jeff May talk about it a little bit, and just in speaking to him one-on-one, I know he has such reverence for that EBR and that brand, and the time that he raced in World Superbike for EBR. But you also raced here in America on the EBR, and it's a V-twin, so there's the connection there. You obviously a relationship with Harley-Davidson too there, but tell us about riding that motorcycle, a true V-twin American Superbike, and it still kind of exists to this day. So tell us about that. And I'm sure you wish that it was still around, but you probably enjoyed riding that, didn't you?
Yeah, for sure. I've always kind of been a fan of V-twins.
Yes.
I mean, we go back to the TZ250s. Those are little V-twin two-strokes. And then I had my share of club racing SV650s. And then, I had plenty of inline four cylinders, but then the opportunity came up. The first time I rode one of Eric's bikes, it was still a Buell. And so 2009, I had lost my ride. I rode for Ulrich's team in 2008 in Supersport, and then lost my ride that next year. So 2009, I spent all year racing Weira National stuff for Vezzer Suzuki, doing their endurance program, and then racing sprint races on a 600 and a 1000. And then towards the end of the year, the team owner, Mark Young, had done a little bit of testing for Eric on their 1125 RR Superbike. And so they had already fielded Taylor Knapp, I think, at Mid-Ohio. And then they wanted to do two bikes at the last race at New Jersey. New Jersey was a new track. Nobody had been there before. They gave me the opportunity to go do a little testing on the bike. We rode at Audubon Country Club in Joliet, Illinois. And I rode on the North course. And I ended up breaking the track record the first time I rode it, and was just like, man, this bike is badass. Like, I had no idea. And so we went to Jersey, and, since nobody had ridden there, it was kind of a clean slate for everyone. And so I think I made it into Super Pole. That was when DMG was running the program. So I made it into Super Pole. I qualified on the second row. I think I qualified 8th. And I ended up finishing 7th and 8th that weekend in Superbike. And in the second race, I was only 6 seconds back from Josh Hayes, who won the race on Sunday. So the little 1125 RR, I mean, we were like 18 mile an hour down on the front straight, but I had the fastest segment 1 splits of anyone in the race. So the thing, it just turned and handled and did all these things that the four cylinders didn't do. And so I was super excited about that opportunity that, maybe I'm going to end up with like a factory Buell Superbike ride. This would be amazing. And so Eric was kind of telling me, we have this other bike, we have this 1190, and we're gonna get it going. And they kind of showed me some pictures of it, and it was just like super exciting. Like, oh man, this thing's real. And then shortly thereafter, Harley dumped the whole Buell brand, and Eric basically had to just kind of close doors. And so Buell was dead for maybe like a year and a half, and then Eric got some funding and restarted EBR motorcycles, Eric Buell Racing. And so he started building that 1190 that he wanted to build under the Harley name, under Buell. And so the worst part about the whole deal was that 1190 was a game changer. It just didn't come out when it should have come out.
Right.
Because if it could have come out in 2010, it would have been right there with the R1s and the Suzukis and, you know, the Ducati at the time. Like, we battled with those guys in 2009 and we were right there. And so it was just a bummer that Eric had to kind of sit on it for a little while and find funding to build it. Because once he built it, then the BMW came out with their bike and the R1 changed their bike. And, you know, the Japanese took a step forward, the European bikes took a step forward, and he just came in with what he had from 2 years ago. And right then and there, it was a little bit long in the tooth, but at the right track and the right conditions, that bike was phenomenal to ride. You know, my best superbike race I ever finished was 4th at Laguna Seca on the EBR 1190. And, you know, a little turn and burn track like that, that's not big horsepower, that bike did amazing. So I'm super grateful for the time that I spent there. I did like 2.5 years working for EBR and riding their motorcycles, and it was awesome. And what I learned riding those big displacement V-twin superbikes, I'm definitely using now in the King of the Baggers and Super Hooligans, because I'm riding big V-twin superbikes or big V-twin engines, you know.
That's awesome that you connected that. That's exactly what I wanted you to do, Cory. Thank you. And the other thing about that is it sort of, so what I said at the top of the show, which I thought was true. So you were a factory superbike rider for a little while.
Yeah, it was a crazy year. 2014 was the last year that AMA Pro Racing ran the Superbike series, and we had lost a bunch of rounds that year. So I think the season was only like 6 rounds long or something.
Yes. Yeah.
But between EBR and then Hero, the Indian brand that was sponsoring and funding the EBR program, they really wanted to go World Superbike. And so they sent, so 2013, the factory riders were Aaron Yates and Jeff May. And so they sent those 2 guys to World Superbike. And then Larry Pegram and I took over the stateside factory Superbike program. So it was all kind of run out of Larry's truck. But since I had ridden their bike the year before, I got to take a step up and ride the factory bike, which was really cool. I mean, not everyone can say they're a factory superbike rider. I mean, I'll bet maybe not the best team on the grid, but I was still one of them. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's one of those that I wanted to definitely point out because, you know, now that Kyle and Travis are factory with Harley, well, you were before with EBR, and that's a very interesting time. And then also, I remember during, just for that short amount of time there, Chris Fillmore was on that KTM during that time too, right? I mean, he was racing Superbike during that.
Yeah, Chris Fillmore and Taylor Knapp were on those RC8 KTMs. So
that's right.
It was neat. I mean, there was 4, you know, well, one year, 2013, there was the 2 KTMs, and then there was 4 EBRs, and then the second year, two of the EBRs left. So then it was just me and Larry versus Taylor and Chris Fillmore. But yeah, it was neat. I kind of miss being the big V twins in Superbike, but it's just something that they don't build no more.
Yeah, they were legit though. Well, so I think that's going to bring us to an end on this, Cory, but we got a lot of other little things about your career. Man, I'm going to have to, one of these off seasons, I got to do some tallying up because, you know, you think about Michael Barnes and not just how long he rode, but how many different bikes he rode. And you're right in there with a mix as far as a rider who's ridden so many different brands of motorcycles, engine configurations, the whole thing from 2-strokes to V-twin 4-strokes to, you know, inline 4s. And your career has spanned a long time, but like I said, it still doesn't seem like you're still a young guy to me when I see you, and you've got such enthusiasm. And, you know, we wish you well the rest of the season and even more, because I'm sure you're going to continue racing with us. And you know, good luck next weekend at Brainerd. We'll make sure we stop in and say hello to you and that great Team Saddleman group that with the 4 riders, including you. So again, thanks for being on with us.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. You know, it's easy to smile when you're doing what you love. And when I'm at the racetrack, I'm doing what I love. So keep me on motorcycles and I'll keep smiling.
There you go.
All right, you guys. Thanks a lot, Cory, and good luck next weekend, and we'll see you in Minnesota in a few days.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. We'll see you soon.